Welcome back to the Valley to Peak Nutrition Podcast. My guest this week is Dustin Diefendurfer. Dustin runs MTNTOUGH, a program and fitness-based app that has become synonymous with training the dedicated. This includes folks in the military, backcountry hunters, thru-hikers, wildland firefighters, ultra runners, moms, dads, grandmas, grandpas, and just about everything in between. It makes sense in a preface like that where you think we would talk nothing but fitness, but in fact we never cover the topic at all. I've been fortunate to spend the last year or more getting to know Dustin and the entire crew over at MTNTOUGH and their heart behind what it is that they do every day. It's been nothing short but an exceptional experience, and I wanted you all to get just a little dose of that. So in today we cover how MTNTOUGH started, the things that have been great about that growth, but also the things that have been really challenging and difficult about that growth. We talk about how impactful things rarely start as trying to create an impact, but just walk through doors that are open for them and eventually create that impact. We talk about making hard decisions and when some of those decisions are just plain stupid. We cover this and a variety of other topics that really give you the opportunity to understand the ethos behind MTNTOUGH, which is stay ready and always being ready to take on any challenge that might present itself. So regardless of where you're at, I feel really confident that you will enjoy this one. You'll be able to take something away from it, and it might even be one that you find yourself visiting often. I know that I probably will go back and listen to this several times just to recap some of the conversation that we had. So without further ado, here is Dustin and I covering the origins of MTNTOUGH, what it means to lead by being second, and what staying ready really means. All right, man. Well, I know you do a ton of these, and I know your time is precious. I'd imagine you're burnt out. So I intentionally, there's nothing in here about training because I know you talk all the time about training. So I wanted to kind of approach it from a different angle that I hope you enjoy. I hope you enjoy doing it, right? Being able to answer something different. And so you've seen the notes a little bit, but I think most people are probably familiar with kind of who you are, and they're definitely familiar with MTNTOUGH just because of me talking about it. But we also have a lot of folks who haven't come from the hunting community. They've come from the backpacking community. Yeah. So if you want, I think a good place just would be to introduce who you are, talk about what MTNTOUGH is, and then we'll kind of dive into the good stuff.
Cool. Yeah. Sounds awesome. I'm excited. I saw your notes and I was like, oh, this is going to be awesome.
Just start from kind of where it is now and who you are and just what MTNTOUGH is in general. Because one thing I'd love to take it to is like, you're an overnight success that started 10 years ago.
Yeah, we talk about that all the time. My wife and I were just joking about it the other day, that the 10-year overnight success. And it's really ironic that has come up because last year at Tough Fest, we had two guest speakers. We had Bert Soren and Remy Warren, and Remy talked about overcoming adversity. But Bert got on stage and he talked about this 10-year rule. And he talked about how anyone you see doing success in business, anyone you see that's successful in hunting, anyone you see that's successful in a sport, his thesis was that 99% of the time there's 10 years of really, really hard work behind what you're seeing. And across everyone in his life, that was true. And he came out of the Olympic shot put community. He went to the Olympic trials and shot put, and all his colleagues are D1 strength and conditioning coaches. Then he got in the fitness and hunting industry. And he's like, man, anyone you talk to that's doing well from a significant standpoint right now, there's 10 years of really, really hard work behind that. But he went even further to say it's usually like 10 years of really hard work that you could tangibly say, here's like when I started and here's where I'm at now. But he's like, there's usually even almost a whole nother 10 years behind that of life that the life circumstances and the life path led them to be able to do the work they're actually doing, which is so true in my life. It's so amazing. We're not quite 10 years in Mountain Tough's history. We're really close, but it does feel like a 10-year overnight success with people that know about us now that we used to we used to feel like we were just a couple guys in this tiny little warehouse in Bozeman, Montana, and it was going to take everything possible for the world to know about us. And Nate and I were joking this year that we got that invite to go out and just share knowledge with the 75th Ranger Regiment. And that's like a once in a lifetime huge honor, huge privilege, opportunity. But we still feel like we're just in a warehouse and no one knows about us. But it's all those baby steps and baby steps and baby steps and baby steps that add up to make that happen. But back to Bert's point, Bert was so accurate that like I could have never got close to starting Mountain Tough without the experiences in my life that led to the creation of Mountain Tough. It was like being a Montana kid and doing a lot of archery elk hunting and then wanting to train to be better. But then it was going down a corporate America route after getting a college degree that taught me that I didn't want to go that route. So my wife and I, we went the nonprofit Africa route, and all these things just built the Mountain Tough story. And I think that's how it is for all things. I know it's similar for you. It's anyone you talk to that is changing people's lives in a really positive direction. It doesn't happen overnight. There's a lot of background information that most people don't see.
And I would be curious to hear if you think this is true. I think that maybe for like being an entrepreneur or owning a business or really whatever term you want to put to it, I think most people that have been successful really don't care what you call them, right? Like they don't call themselves anything. I think though that like from an outsider looking in, the perception is that was always the goal from day one, is build a business. And in at least in my experience from knowing people, and you can tell me if this is true for you personally with Mountain Tough or even Bird or someone else you might know, that's never true. Like it never was designed. You never really started it with the intention of it being this thing. You just kind of had this passion, and then you did what was in front of you. And then if a door opened, then even if you didn't know what to do with the door, you're like, yeah, I'll do it. I'll figure it out. I don't know how to do it, but I'll figure it out. Has that been true of you and your perception of like Bert or other, because you have such a great rich network of people that have similar, businesses, not similar in the training sense, but just similar stories.
Mm-hmm. I mean, that was so true for me. And it was really interesting because the businesses I tried to start that did not work, I think I was trying to start them because I wanted to start a business. And I think the things that really, really work and stick and have longevity behind them, you're starting because it's your passion, it's your mission, it's what you love doing, it's what you want to do, it's what the market needs. And those are the things that in my life and in my network seem to have a very long lasting impact, not a flash in a pan. And so I look at my life history and I think about a couple ways where I was kind of seduced down the wrong path. I think the first path that I feel like I'm glad that I took it now, but I don't know if it was the answer I would give my kids now, was like go to college, get a degree, go to college, get a degree. And so that's what my network was telling me to do. And so that's what I did. I went to Montana State University. I got a marketing degree, a management degree, and an entrepreneurship degree. And I was guiding fly fishing trips to pay for college. And so in our family, we had to pay for our own school, and I did not want any debt. And so I would guide fly fishing out of a drift boat for about 90 days in the summer. And I would come up and write a check to go to school. And I loved guiding so much. I loved it's physical. You're rowing all day. You're meeting great people. Like the people that come out for guided fly fishing trips are always just a wealth of knowledge. And then you're outdoors, you're outdoor, there's some adventure, you're getting vitamin D. And I remember graduating and getting that degree, and the world is kind of telling you, now that you have a business degree, you should go get a business job. And so that is exactly what I did. I found like this great corporate America type job in Bozeman. It was super high paying for my age. And instantly I felt really miserable. It was indoors. I was on the phone all day long. There was no physicality. You're very stationary, very sedentary. And that's a weird feeling, I think, for a lot of people and a lot of kids with degrees, a lot of men, I think everyone, where you're kind of stuck in this situation that is what the world kind of told you to do, but it's also you also spend a lot of time and money to make that happen, but you're just not happy. And I think that that is similar to starting a business just to start a business versus doing something that you're actually made and created to do based on your life history and your passions and your interests. And so I was stuck in that corporate job, pretty miserable. And my wife was in a really similar boat. So she had gotten a marketing degree, worked for this phenomenal marketing agency in Bozeman. And she had kind of the same feeling of not really being satisfied with that position after getting that degree. And we both decided to quit our jobs and sell most of the stuff we have, put everything else in storage. And we went to work in Africa for a couple of years. So we went from Ethiopia to Uganda, trying to rescue and help children that had just came out of the civil war over there between Uganda and Sudan. And our family thought we were crazy. Like even our closest friends thought we were crazy to kind of throw that degree away in a sense and go after what our heart was really telling us to do. And it was certainly like the most rewarding, cup filling, adventure filling, physical, outdoors, vitamin D. It was everything that we were looking for. And we were so glad we did it. But like on paper, it didn't make any sense at all. I tell a lot of people that the years we did that together, our married household combined income on our tax documents was $18,000 a year combined. But like we could have never been happier. We were so full of joy and happy because we were doing what we felt like we were built to do. And I think that is what you're seeing behind most of these successful, long-lasting companies, is someone behind that is doing what they were built to do. And like I tell my kids, that's the most important thing now. Like I don't care if they go to college. I don't care. Like we're doing homeschool now. Like I don't care if they ever go to any sort of university. I think what is setting people apart is people finding out what they're good at, finding out what they enjoy, combining those, and then becoming the best in the world, one of the best in the world at that craft. That's where I really see people shining right now.
Yeah, I could not agree with you more. I mean, like, obviously, you have to pay for whatever, but to be miserable at that expense, like, just simply is worth it. And even going back to, so you sharing that story about the work that you and your wife had done in Africa, and talking earlier about Bert and those guys giving a speech last year at Tough Fest, and I was at Tough Fest this year, and you gave a speech and you talked a little bit about that work, but you sort of the underlying ethos of that, I've never told you this, was that basically that God will always provide. And you've always been, you guys have always been very transparent about your faith, and that Mountain Tough's a faith-based company. And so that was sort of the heart of it. And you went on to talk about the car wreck that you had gotten in, and you were trying to get back to Africa to continue the work that you had done.
Yeah.
Long story short, not much damage done to the car, and you got a check for the exact amount to get a flight back to Africa, which is awesome and obviously a divine type of a thing. But in there, the point was that God would always provide. So before we really started recording, I told you that we had bought this house, we'd bought some property, and that keynote was a major driver in me and my wife pressing on. The finances always made sense on paper, but when you start seeing more and more zeros, you get more and more freaked out, right? But your speech in that kept, and my wife and I, everything we do is rooted in faith. So obviously we're praying through this too, like just trying to make sure that we make a good decision and a smart decision, but also a faith-based decision. This is going to lead to a question in a minute too. But part of what pressing into that was that talk kept coming back to me. It was like, that's very true. When I look back on whether it's the business, whether it's our personal lives, whether it's really anything, we've always had exactly what we needed, at the time. And so here's I guess a question. Well, number one, that's a thanks. Second question, because this was a genuine question that I was processing through as we went through this, was, and I don't know if there's a right answer. I'm just curious your opinion. At what point do you feel like, whether it's in business or your personal life, where does faith, and in our notes, I used the word stupidity, which seems kind of harsh. I don't want to, be harsh about it, but where does faith versus stupidity overlap? Where it's just like, all right, I'm going to go in here trusting you're going to provide, versus sometimes I feel like I've made decisions in my past where even if God were in front of me, he'd be like, you knew that was stupid. How do you, as you process things that are take some faith, is there a line there where you feel like, all right, I'm going to lean heavier on that versus this might be kind of not really faith and more foolish?
Yeah, I love that question, because that Tough Fest speech was really enjoyable for me to talk about, because that story of God providing was so powerful for me, as a lot of them are not as black and white as that one where I got rear-ended and it was the exact amount of money I needed at the exact time. Normally, when we look back at our life history, I know we can all look back and see how God has provided for us every single day to get to where we're at right now. And that gives me so much confidence. But that little fender bender was like so black and white. It was like, hey, you need this right now. And it was so unique that the girl was going over to pet a parakeet in her passenger seat. And I was like, no one drives with a parakeet. It was such a God moment that it just boosted my confidence more and more. But I think, to your question of living your life over faith versus being too big of a risk taker and being a little bit dangerous, what I have started to do as I've gotten older and kind of matured, which is still really hard for me because I'm not incredibly patient. I always want things to happen right away. But the things that I really look for now are affirmation. And affirmation has helped me answer that question more than anything else. So I'll feel that tug from God where he's calling me in a different direction or he's nudging me in a different direction. I think we all feel that tug, And a lot of people are scared to take that risk. So God is going to nudge you. He's going to push you. He's going to uh, tug your life in a different direction. And a lot of people are going to be scared to take that risk. And those are the risks we need to take for sure. Those are the risks that are going to give your life like big meaning, joy, and purpose. So you certainly need to do everything you can to take that leap of faith and get over that fear. But you also have to watch out for the ones the that aren't from God. And so for me, I look for affirmation, and affirmation is I feel it, I'm thinking about something, and then a good friend brings it up, or I run into someone who brings up the same point, or something on the radio or something on TV catches my eye. So I look for those affirming signs from God that this is really something that I'm supposed to pursue.
I love that. And so as I was processing this, I was doing the same thing, right? I was like, in fact, like I would say to my detriment, I'm often trying to find ways out more than I'm trying to find affirmation. It's more of like, just constantly trying to find any way out. I came across this article that I loved, and the guy that was writing, I think it was Carey Nieuwhof. I don't remember who's, he kind of writes some stuff in the faith realm. And he made 2 points, but he said one of them was, is what he asks himself 2 questions whenever he comes to these crossroads. One of them is wisdom killing my trust in God? And the second is, does my trust in God disregard all wisdom? And he goes on to say in there, he says, eventually, he says, I just make a decision after that and I stick with it. And then he says, so many dreams have died because people were terrified to make the wrong decision. Don't be one of them. I loved that. And, I think that lines up so well with what you're saying as far as like affirmation. And I know there's obviously a lot of people that listen to this who don't have any faith background. And I think like, if that's the case, my advice would be to try it.
Yeah.
If you're curious if stuff like this works, try it. And that was my story. One day I tried it and it quote unquote worked. And then that just continued to evolve into the relationship, now.
Yeah. That's so cool.
One thing that you and I have talked about, and in fact, you spoke on this at Tough Fest too, was like, as a leader, one way that you feel like you're being challenged and maturing, and I believe you said a mentor challenged you on this, is like the irony of Mountain Tough is that it went from being non-corporate to now it's big, to where there's all these moving parts and you're expected to be places, and you've sort of you're not lost that freedom, but there's more expectation on you. Yeah. And you've shared like the difference between maturing and staying, even though you feel like I didn't necessarily, you've never said you didn't want this, but at the same time, I think the mentor challenged you to stay in it and grow it versus stepping out of it and removing yourself out of it and going to something that's maybe less public. Can you talk about like what you've learned through that?
Yeah, that's been a big theme in my life over the last year and probably 2 years, because Mountain Tough did start a lot differently than it is right now. And I think that's important for people to know. And so Lindsay and I had gotten home from that Africa experience. And the only reason we came home was because we were pregnant with our first daughter. And so we came home so that our daughter could be born in an American hospital. We didn't come home to start working in Africa. We came home and we were naive. We had never had a child of our own. And we're like, we'll stay with family for 6 weeks or so and have this baby girl be born in Bozeman. And then we'll just go right back to work in Uganda. And when my daughter, Ava, came out as this real human being, I was like, there's no way I'm taking this tiny little baby of our own to Uganda right now. There's too many health risks. There's too many travel risks. There's too many safety risks. And so that is when Mountain Tough started, which is crazy because it was kind of a reverse burn the ship scenario. So many entrepreneurship type speakers are going to tell you burn the ships and go all in on what you want to do. And I believe in that 100%. You got to go all in on these dreams you want to chase. And that seems to really set people apart versus people that are dabbling 50-50 in some things. But I was in a almost a reverse burn the ships. It was I'm back home. I didn't have a job and I had this baby girl and I knew I wasn't going back right away. So it was either kind of go back to the corporate America route or start this Mountain Tough thing that I'd always been thinking about as an elk hunter and as a guy into fitness. And so we just went for it. But going for it back then was a lot different than now. And so I started training people in the park. We were training in the park right behind my house. And we were doing lunges across the soccer field and pull ups on the monkey bars. At first, I had no gear. So it was all body weight. And then I would start bringing like dumbbells and sandbags in my truck just to add a little bit of gear. But the park sessions went from, it started with 3 guys. So it was 3 guys. And then we went to like 10. And then I had a full morning class. And then I was running 3 morning classes, or I was running 3 classes a day at that park. Then we went to a gym. We only went to a gym because winter was coming in Bozeman and you couldn't train in the park in all the snow at negative 20 degrees. So I leased some gym space just to get those classes inside. But for me, those were some profound years of Mountain Tough history because I loved training all day. I loved physical training. I loved human performance, finding the edges of human performance, coming up with creative ways to do new things. And I loved pushing people really hard that were right in front of me, people you could actually touch and see. And as you said, we're a lot different now. So the fast forward 8 years from then, and we are entirely online. We have athletes in the day testing different programming. So there's still some human performance going on physically in the lab, but our community is online. And so my job has changed to a lot more of a corporate job, managing a team in an online business. So ironically, it has transformed into something I was running away from. And that is a really hard struggle and balance for me. And one of my mentors said, like you should continue to lead this thing rather than looking away to run away from this thing, even though it's not scratching that, physical training itch that you once were looking to scratch. And I think there is a tremendous amount of wisdom in that because there has been a lot of maturity that has happened as a leader and as a business owner across those 8 years. And I think that is a lot of God kind of refining us by the fire. And so there's been some ups and there's been some downs in Mountain Tough's history, from the park sessions to this giant online community. And from a faith perspective, that is kind of God just refining us and refining us and refining us and refining us to do the job that we're doing now. And to just bail on that because I want to be outside more, I think is a little bit immature. And that's what he was saying, that could be a little immature to bail on all of that refining. And I think there's a lot of wisdom in that, even though it's hard to reconcile. I think that you probably see this in your business, Kyle, but like God, through our lives helps us build all of this human capital. So all the people we know, our network, all these great relationships we form in this industry. He helps us build this intellectual capital. So how we do things, the way we do business. For Mountain Tough, a big part of that is, the way that we're able to create a lot of content. That's our intellectual capital. And then we all have our spiritual capital, but then we create this financial capital as well. And financial capital for me is so interesting. It's like finances only work on earth. They don't work in heaven. But we have relationships in heaven, we have spiritual capital in heaven, and we have intellectual capital. So financial is the only one that's really an earthly thing, which does make me think of it as a tool. It's just this tool, like it's like if I sent you somewhere with a hammer, but you didn't need that hammer when you got back to me. And so I think additionally, what that mentor was trying to show me is, like, instead of bailing, you can just change your leverage to do things that might be a little bit more cup filling for you, rather than bailing and starting over from scratch. So we've all spent a lot of chunks of our lives building that capital, and how can we use that capital for the greater good, to fight the good fight? And that was really eye opening for me, even though it's still not a super easy process.
Do you think that that conversation and that thinking is why you guys are so generous? And that's true of, I mean, that's true of everyone there. I'm somewhat in a fortunate boat in that we've gotten to know each other so well, and I've got to spend time with you guys, a lot over the last year. There's not a soul in there who's not of like the highest caliber, kindest heart on the planet. I mean, the fact that you've like slowly built a team that's there over 10 years, I mean, that alone, that works that well together is like almost a podcast in and of itself. But even as a business, I mean, you guys are giving away 6 weeks free. It's like, hey, go take complete advantage of everything that we've built for 6 weeks. And if you decide you don't like it, that's okay. I mean, you're just everything. And even the lab, right? The lab is at Tough Fest, for example, the lab is extremely nice. Turf, really nice, high quality, expensive equipment. Tough Fest, you're like, yeah, gym's open all night. If anybody wants to sleep here, sleep here. If you want to use it, you can use it. You're so generous. Do you think that comes from like a core, at your core, you believe like I'm going to leave it one day. Why not just spend it and let it be used for people that, may need it or may be able to also benefit from it?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's so connected that we have a really strong faith-based team, and I think it's just slowly been built like that over the years. And a lot of those individuals from the early days have built their own teams, and they've built their own teams looking for those same qualities and attributes. And it's not perfect every day, but I think that culture has spread across the organization of generosity, which is really, really amazing. Because honestly, it wasn't intentional. It wasn't like I'm going to intentionally build a very generous organization. It's all happened unintentionally, just by the people that we've hired and the attributes that we've looked for in those people. And then they kind of do their own things and own their own initiatives that are incredibly generous, that a lot of times I don't even know about, or I find out about them later. But I'm so glad that they did it that way, because it allows us to leverage that financial capital for good. But it it also is like we're creating a distinct organization. And I think that is kind of what God wants. He wants us to be distinct and do things a little bit different than the world is doing. But man, a lot of that just happened based on the people we look for. It didn't we weren't in strategic planning meetings asking how we can be more generous this year. Like it's just happening because that's who the team is, which is really pretty cool.
Yeah, and I mean, I do believe that. I definitely believe that. But I will tell you this: the first time that I came out there to record, it sort of stood out to me, almost to where like I was waiting for somebody to come from behind a door and be like, "Ha, we're gonna bill you," or whatever. And so I'd asked Nate. We were on the last day. We were recording a couple of reels for the very first nutrition program that we had built, and I was like, man, you guys are so generous. I had just met you all, right? You guys are just so generous and kind. And he said, his comment was, because Dustin is like, that comes from Dustin. And I think that says a lot about you and the way that you view things. But I also think that, and this is just an outsider looking in, you're so good at giving them autonomy and letting them, like, you trust them. You trust that they're good at their skill set. You're not like, you are the antithesis of a traditional business owner in the best ways possible. You're not over the top of them. You trust them. You give them the reins to be creative and do things that they want. And obviously it shows so much. And I think that while it's true that they themselves are that way, I also think that you have set the tone for that. I think that's incredible. So well done.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that. I think it is. It just made me think that, because I don't think about that very much, but it does make me think about, because that's good to hear, because you don't always know like what your team is thinking, but it's just, leadership is so much about just leading by example. And it just made me think about my kids, where it's like you never know if you're quite doing what good enough as a parent, but you don't realize how much the people around you are just soaking it in. They're just soaking in what you do and how you do it. Even if there's a delayed gratification of you ever knowing that, like, our team is soaking in how we operate, our kids are soaking in how we operate. It's just the classic of like leading by example.
Yeah, I'll never forget. So growing up, my dad he worked for the government in the transportation department. He was one of the senior leader guys or whatever there. And I'll never forget, because he would meet with the laborers every Tuesday morning. And I started noticing this trend that when it was the winter, we'd have snowplows run. The snowplows would run at midnight, and he would always go in. And so as a young kid, I started asking, I was like, well, why do you go in if you don't snowplow? And he's like, if I'm going to expect my guys to be there at midnight away from their families, I need to be there away from my family, supporting those guys. And so as I got older, he started taking me in with him. And I started noticing, like, they issued him a vehicle, and it was always a pickup truck. And his superior, his lead guy or whatever, he would get a new one every year. And I would ask my dad, I was like, why don't you get a new one? He's like, mine works fine. I give mine to the guys in the shop. I let them get a new truck every year, and I just keep driving the same ones. Yeah. And so as I started going through typical school and working a job, still really young, not really knowing what I'm doing. I had a degree, but if anybody's honest, they have a degree, but that's about all you've got. It's a piece of paper. That's basically it. And so I just remembered that. And so when my supervisors would ask for help or whatever, say, I don't know, but I'll help you figure it out. Just from watching him say, and the concept was, I don't know, but I'll help you. I'll help you figure it out. And I think that says a lot to people, and to your point, and me saying all of that is, you're right. You may not feel like people are absorbing you making small decisions or that no one's watching, but they are, whether it's kids or if you lead a team or friends or, any of those things. I think it's important to hold yourself accountable to whatever it is that you want to be because people watch.
Hmm. Yeah, I love that so much. Like what your dad did. It's it's like true greatness. We're all looking for true greatness, and most of what we see on the news or social media is not always true greatness, but like the big shiny objects we can relate back to of true greatness, whether that's like an Abraham Lincoln type individual. We all have the same type of individuals in our own personal lives, but like true greatness is a lot of people that are suffering for other people's benefit. It's not always crazy traumatic suffering, but they're making sacrifices every day for other people to benefit from. And
Yeah.
like that's what your dad was doing. And I mean, that's the stuff that matters. That's the stuff that makes a huge difference.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I couldn't agree more. All right. We've got a couple minutes. I didn't want to miss this part. So, I gave, like in our notes, I gave us three scenarios, hopefully just to provide some encouragement, right? Because we're on this conversation of greatness and leading a legacy, which gets talked about a lot on podcasts, but people miss the small things like just being sacrificial, like you living sacrificial so others might benefit. And like the ethos of Mountain Tough is stay ready, and a lot of guys like we've met at the showdown in Salt Lake in February. Sportsman's, is it
Western,
Sportsman's Hunt
Western.
Expo.
Yep.
Yes,
Yep.
yes. Right. And one of the themes that you hear is like, oh, I can't do those workouts. Those workouts are so hard. And then you start to talk to them, they're like, well, you can make them what you want and slowly evolve into that. And so a lot of people, a lot of men, at least that I feel like we've talked to lately, feel like they're sort of imposter, right? Like they're not at a level, whatever that level is. So I gave three different scenarios, and I'd be curious what your advice would be to these three different guys.
You bet.
All right. So scenario one, you have a guy who is filled with self-doubt, inferiority, and imposter syndrome. They couldn't see, quote, staying ready in the forest from the trees, and the idea of becoming that person is nearly as far as the moon. What advice would you give that guy?
Yeah, I think that imposter syndrome is a real thing, and I think it impacts us all. It impacts all males and females, regardless of their fitness level or their professional level. It's something that's always just clawing at the back of our minds. No matter where we're at, we often don't really feel that we should be there. And with fitness, you are right. This has been a really common theme over the last couple of years of people that we run into at trade shows and events of guys just don't feeling like they're ready or don't feel like they can do something that hard. And I think it's been helpful to me to talk to a lot of people about like we're all beginners at stuff all the time that we really really are not great at when we start. And that is true of any sort of professional athlete, any sort of professional archer, any sort of professional shooter, any sort of professional like NFL or NHL athlete. Like they are they're great at their activity because they've had so many reps and hours in it. But if you hand like an NFL athlete a guitar, they're right back to being a beginner. They're right back to feeling like they're terrible at something, and they're going to be terrible at it, and they are going to kind of work their way through it and be beginners for a while. And that's so true for each and every one of us. And so beginners in fitness are often people that haven't worked out in a while or haven't worked out since high school gym class or high school wrestling or high school football. That's what you see a lot of is men and women in their 40s that maybe were physically active in high school but haven't been in a while, and they're just kind of scared to go back to that beginner point. But I think you have to, like, you have to put on the parachute and get out of the plane on that one, because like physical activity can be hard regardless of your fitness level. So for elites, it's just as hard as intermediates, and for intermediates, it's just as hard as beginners. It's it's the process itself that's creating all this tremendous life change. So the movement is helping with certainly like your metabolism. The movement's helping with all sorts of mental health issues. Like the movement is the medicine, and it's just as hard for an elite as it is for a beginner. The elite might just be getting a little bit more work done, or a little bit more rounds, or a little bit more calories, but like the movement is medicine. And so you have to just get over the fear on that one and get going, because it is crazy, the mind body connection, and how much life change can just start happening by simply getting some physical activity and getting a good night's sleep. Like just that alone, like the difference you can feel is amazing. So with Mountain Tough, specifically to that question, you know, our original stuff was really hard. We were trying to really go after the aspirational top tier of human performance athletes in the early days, 4 or 5 years ago. Nowadays, for sure, over the last few years, we've spent a tremendous amount of time on taking care of anyone, regardless of their fitness level. So we've spent a lot of time on, like, if you are a beginner, we are going to grab you by the hand and take you step by step by step, safely and effectively, to get you moving, get you off the couch, and get you to that next level. And so that's been a pretty drastic shift in our company. But that's what it's all about. It's all about, like, I mean, the more Americans that are moving, the better we are. And so we're pretty proud of that. And there's been a lot of options added over the last couple of years.
Yeah, that's great. I love that piece of it too. Is, you know, like we've worked with elite level athletes, valley to peak, to beginners, and there's a perception that the elite level folks have this thing that they wake up with every morning and they was thrive to go do it. And I'm not found that to be the case. Like they battle not wanting to go to. They just, as you said, put the parachute on and jump out of the plane anyway. And like I'm a prime example of the fact that if you weren't born with it, whatever your perception of it is, you can slowly evolve into being the person who wakes up and exercises even on days that you don't want to. And what I love about it is, like, there's always more to learn. You never ever just get there. And the perception of, like, okay, well, if I engage in training, that means hiking sucks less, right? Or hiking doesn't suck. It's like, it still sucks. I mean, there still is, like, going up 3,000 vertical feet never does not suck. It just sucks a lot less, you know? Yeah. And I think when people see that, it kind of grabs hold of them. So I love that. All right. So here's scenario 2. We'll skip the middle one because it's kind of the same. So if you have a guy or a girl who feels like they've got this piece down to a science, they've got wisdom in it, they feel like this is something they're really, really confident in, what would your advice be to them?
From a fitness perspective?
Not necessarily from a fitness perspective, just maybe more of like a mindset perspective. So if we think about the whole always ready mindset, they feel like, yes, I am that person. I am that guy or that girl, always ready, always, you know, I feel confident about that. I'm very logically minded, not emotionally driven.
Yeah, I would say that we would encourage really no one to ever be comfortable feeling that. The feeling that usually leads to is the pride before the fall. And so the pride before the fall is being overconfident, whether that's overconfident mentally or physically. And that's going to usually lead to a tremendous fall, usually connected to ego around that confidence. So uh, we encourage people the opposite, that like things are always going to change, and we need to embrace and accept that change and be ready to change with it, whether that's physically, nutritionally, mentally, professionally. Life is really hard. Life is hard, but at Mountain Tough, we we believe life was supposed to be hard. And so just that paradigm shift alone has been so helpful to so many people, that things are harder when you expect them to be really easy. So when you expect something to be really easy and it's not, you do go through a shock in your system. But if you expect things to be difficult and you expect things to be hard and challenging, when you encounter that challenge, it's not as easy because you were planning on it to show up. And for me, that's definitely the way life is supposed to be. I mean, life is supposed to be full of trials and tribulations, because adversity builds our character. And if we didn't have any adversity, we would never be able to develop in who we are. And life would be quite boring. And the highs wouldn't feel like highs because we would never have any lows. And so, what I've experienced in my own personal life is you can never really master any of these things. In our Mountain Tough ethos, the pillars are spiritual, mental, physical, and nutritional. And in my life, there is always new things to learn, and there's always new ways to get better at these different legs of a bar stool. And keeping those legs of the bar stool strong, all four of them, is what keeps that thing standing up. And life is going to throw a lot of different things at you that you have to adapt and change around. So I I've seen a lot of runners that were winning marathons and ultra marathons that can't run anymore, and they have to adapt and pivot, and you'll see them become great swimmers or bikers or mountain bikers. They didn't just pack up kind of the fitness side of their life and put it away. And it's the same across all of those pillars, that we're always learning, we're always trying to improve. And that lifelong learning of trying new things and seeing how we can get better, it leads to so much purpose and mission in life. And without it, life can really knock us down.
That's great. And I think one thing that I would add on that is a page from the Mountain Tough book is like, if you do feel like you're in a good spot, go encourage someone who's not. And, whether that was the team workout in Salt Lake or the team workouts I've been a part of at the lab or Tough Fest, it's like the team that finishes first doesn't leave. You guys encourage them, go do wall sits with team number 10, get around the people that are coming, maybe picking up the rear and on the bike last, and cheer them on. Like the energy and passion with Eric McCormick with those guys on the bike at Tough Fest that were, finishing up, like that's NBA championship style emotion. That was pretty awesome to get everybody around, all of them, and just see people, truly give everything they've got left in them on that bike.
Man.
I think that was awesome.
Yeah, it's pretty cool, because you can see that in a physical element. You can see physically, if you're struggling and you take your eye off your own struggle and you encourage someone else in the room that's struggling, there is a biological, psychological, chemical impact to your body. And so a lot of the special operators that we've interviewed on the Mountain Tough podcast, when you ask them how they made it through selection, like 8 out of 10 will inform you the way that they made it is they focused on the couple guys they had around them. So things hurt really bad, things sucked really bad. And instead of thinking about how bad their legs hurt, how much lactic acid they had in their legs, they would lift their eyes and encourage someone downstream from them. And just by that alone, they felt better. So there is a lot going on with that concept of when I'm really hurting, if I look at someone across the room and encourage them, my hurt feels a lot less. And you can experience that in the lab in a mountain tough workout. So if I'm dying and we're on a ski erg and we're sprinting as hard as we can, and I look at Nate and say some positive words to Nate, I instantly feel better. So physically, my output didn't go down, but I feel better. So there's psychological, chemical, and biological things that happen with that. And it's such an easy hack. It's such an easy hack when you're hiking up a mountain, when you're packing out a bowl, when you're in the middle of a hard workout. If you just stop thinking about yourself and thinking about the people with you, you feel it like clockwork. It's like a light switch, which there's not many things in life like that. And the thing that I love the most is like that same principle works on the whole mental side of your life too. So like mentally, if you're depressed or you're anxious or if you're having a really tough time right now, we have a tendency to ruminate on that. So we're going to ruminate on how bad things are, how hard things are. And that rumination is going to make things worse and worse and worse and worse. So we are going to overthink problems until they are way worse in our mind than they actually are in reality. But that same hack you can use in the gym, you can use in these mental areas of life. And so if you're dying mentally at work or at home, if you pick up the phone and call a buddy that you know is hurting, or if you call a family member that you know is hurting, the same physical, biological, and chemical elements that happen in the gym will happen in your life. And so that is one of my favorite hacks of like, just put your eyes on someone else and life can go a lot smoother for sure.
So good, man. Where can people find Mountain Tough if they're interested in checking you guys out?
Yeah, so Mountain Tough, everyone does start on the free trial, which is awesome. MTNTOUGH.com, and then you just click start free trial and you'll be able to get going right there. And like you mentioned, you can see everything we have to offer on that. So you'll see all of our physical, daily mobility, spiritual, mental, your nutrition programs, Kyle, are all in there, are going to be in there. And a lot of people do that. You can also just download it straight out of the App Store. So we're native in all app stores. So you can grab us on iOS, Android, and then we're on all the smart TV streaming platforms also.
Yeah, and for like I've said this repeatedly before on our podcasts, which you've probably never heard me say, but I don't know if there's a better value that exists for what it breaks down to be for a monthly cost as far as what all you get. And when you know, whether it's, I mean, the fact alone of being able to wake up, press an app and it tells you what to go do instead of wandering about in the gym and going back to chest and buys, even though you did it yesterday and you like them. It's like, it just, I mean, that, and then the fact that even if you know how to dabble in programming, not having to write your own, like that alone is worth. And then you've got, you know, there's mobility and there's educational videos on, you know, how to lift correctly, form, that's what it's called, form, and nutrition and mobility and yoga. And it's like, if you can't find something in there to do, then look harder, I guess. But I'll definitely link that in the show notes so people can just go click and check it out. And then, yeah, I appreciate you joining me, man. It's always great to talk to you.
Yeah, likewise, man. Appreciate you. And thanks for everything you've done with us the last couple of years. It's been awesome.
I want to say thanks to Dustin for joining me when we recorded this. It was an extremely busy time for both of us and we had to reschedule, but made it happen. And I truly think that you guys will take away a lot of good things from it, just like I did from our conversation. We'll be back again in a couple of weeks with another new episode. We do have some fall stuff coming up here at Valley to Peak if you're interested. We're going to be launching our next and final cohort of Foundations Plus in October. So this is a great time if you're interested in learning more about nutrition, how to create your own program in nutrition, how to navigate and adjust your own program with nutrition, how to eliminate the confusion that usually comes with nutrition. We will do that together in our group that will run from October into December. And you can really take away some information that'll help you clear up any misconceptions or confusions that you've got and be able to navigate your own nutrition successfully. So the sign up for that is in the show notes if you're interested. And if you have any questions, you can always email us at info@v2pnutrition.com, and we would be glad to answer those. See you guys back here again in a couple of weeks. Have a good week, everyone.